Well, hello, solar industry friends, and welcome. I have a very exciting panel of people here today that represent a truly significant volume of commercial industrial solar. And so the opinions will be extremely interesting and a broad range of opinions, given the difference in roles of people here on the panel. But first, I want to thank you so much for joining us and visiting our Solaredge Roundtable entitled Choosing Commercial, What Matters Most. And this is our first ever virtual Solar Power International, so excited to be here. My name is Carolyn Humphreys. I'm the Commercial and Industrial Sales Manager for Solaredge Technologies, and I'll be one of your co-moderators for the next 55 minutes. Moderating with me is Ben Frank, our CNI Sales Director. I am truly delighted to introduce a wonderful group of panelists, amongst them Candice McAllowitz, Managing Member of C2 Energy Capital, CJ Colavito, VP of Engineering for Standard Solar, Edgar Lim, VP of Technology and Procurement for EnerSolar, Adam Gussie, VP of Operations for Sunvest Solar, and Rick Ivan, CEO of Pure Power Engineering. Thank you so much, you guys, for being here. And Ben will ask the first question.
All right, so thank you, Carolyn, for that. So now's where the fun starts, and let's jump into the first question. I mean, we know it's been just a crazy year that we've all experienced. I mean, here we are having a panel, a virtual SPI, and we're doing it virtually. You know, it's kind of crazy. So the first question, and CJ, I'll start with you. Despite of all the craziness of this year, what's your perspective on the commercial market through the end of this year and as we go into 2021?
Yeah, well, I would say that Standard Solar is in a really good position from our perspective. We've worked with a strong suite of partners throughout the United States on commercial, industrial, and community solar PV system development. And we have a full dance card. We're expecting to do another 125 megawatts of projects that we put into operation between now and the end of next September. And we have that full target value of megawatts already on the books, already under contract, in design and permitting, and much of it under construction. So outlook is very strong for us, especially for the fourth quarter of calendar 2020 and going into next year. And we're optimistic about seeing growth across all sectors. I'd say the biggest challenge probably is tax equity and some capital markets that seems to be suffering from some of the uncertainty in the economy and in the markets right now. But Standard Solar's been in a position where we were able to secure large tranches of tax equity to support the projects that we already have in our pipeline right now.
Excellent, CJ. I appreciate that. It's good to hear that. Doesn't sound like things are quite back to normal, but sounds like you got your plate full for the next 12 months for sure. Rick, I know you do design work. You and your team, your company, do design work for companies across the country. So you have a unique perspective that many others may not see on a national level. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so we're not dealing with the end customers in the commercial space. We're one level removed, working for the developers, such as all those on the stage today. And so far this year, we worked for over 150 across the country. So it gives us a very good perspective on trends. From a growth standpoint, this year, some companies slowed down a bit, a bunch have gotten busier. In the aggregate, it's absolutely been in the positive as far as growth goes. Not much of a downtick through COVID. All our commercial clients in the aggregate seem to have just plowed straight through that and maintained being busy. And that's really exciting. And I expect that to carry on to next year as well. From a technology standpoint, as time goes on this year into next year, you're going to see more and more states adopting newer codes, such as the National Electrical Code 2017 edition. And with that, you're going to see a change in technology required. Rapid shutdown rules, for instance, are going to change, and you're going to need to have optimizers or MLPE Solaredge happens to be a provider of one of those solutions, and we're seeing more and more of our clients now shifting from the traditional string inverter topology to those that have the optimizers and MLPE with it as well.
Appreciate that, Rick. Carolyn?
Great, thank you, everyone. I love getting good news. Like, who doesn't, right? So I love that it's a net positive for sure. I'm going to talk about a topic near and dear to my heart, and one that's important to everybody. I mean, I don't think anyone would say that safety hasn't been always important and critically important, but sort of to what you were just talking about, with stricter code requirements and increasing scrutiny from inspectors, which is also very interesting. Things that weren't being enforced before being enforced now, and more instructive customers. We're finding more and more customers saying, "Hey, we require X, Y, or Z that is to do with safety." As you guys think about safety, how does it factor into your decision making? Kind of as you're thinking about it more conceptually, designing, building, and even maintaining projects. I'd love to start with you, Adam, being the head of operations. I'd love to hear first how you think about it.
Yeah, I think Rick hit it on the head. Because we're based in Wisconsin, we made a transition to 2017, jumping from 2011. So the forcing of code officials to drive you to a more safer and proactive system, which is in the best interest of the owner and operator of the system, that transitioned us from a design of roof-mounted inverters or things to address 2014 rapid shutdown to much more of a straight, optimized, and safer system, which in the long run fits the industry better, fits the owner and operator of the systems better, and we see it pay fruits to our operation technicians as well. So it's really kind of helped to get you in front of a lot of things that in the Midwest, from an inspection standpoint, they weren't really paying attention to or really driving. So it was nice to see it forced through building codes, but then also see the industry adapt and grow so that Solaredge was a great option for a long time, but now you have multiple other options to work with and other partners to make sure that you can build a system that's going to operate well and be easily maintained and serviced, instead of some of the things that now we deal with from systems built over the last 5 years, that when you go back to try to safely maintain and operate them, you have to adapt your safety solutions for getting equipment access to rooftops, in general, the servicing is a lot less safe or has to involve a lot more planning than you are now transitioning to with a optimized MLPE system.
Well, I appreciate your positive attitude, because I know that, given all the changes that we endure in solar, not everybody's always cheerful about new things, but I appreciate your stance, because I share it, that, this is something that's important, and not just, it's not because I work for Solaredge. I work for Solaredge because I care about safety. So thank you for that. I'd really like to get your perspective, Edgar, because you might look at it a little bit differently, or something in addition to or instead of.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Carolyn. And I would echo what Rick and Adam just mentioned as well about safety. For EnerSolar, it is definitely one of our core values, and has the highest weight in our decision matrix.
Wow.
We're constantly working with vendors, including Solaredge, to ensure that the products that we incorporate into our systems are safe, throughout the life of the system. Our sister company, Max Solar, they have a very well qualified team of technicians that perform O&M on a good majority of our portfolio. I think they have more than 250 sites under their belt at this point, commercial systems, and they've been really helpful in closing the feedback loop to ensure that we're continuously working to design safer and more efficient systems. And I believe EnerSolar has a strong reputation within the industry, and I say that with tongue in cheek, but I think it's true. And so does everyone here, including Standard and SunVest and Pure Power, and which is why I think we've forged long-term partnerships with many corporations many Fortune 500s to continue developing solar and storage systems on their facilities. And we really plan to preserve that trust by installing safe and reliable systems.
That's terrific. I love the part about closing the loop. I know that, Candace, you're Mike Howell, the fact that you guys listen to him and that his opinion is really, really important, because sometimes there is a break in that communication from the O&M team to the front end where you are, and to close that loop and have everybody's input is so valuable. So thank you for that, Edgar. That is really, really helpful. I'm going to switch to the focus to some recent trends. Safety is not a trend. Safety is forever and always. But the trends are interesting, and they're always a little different. And in solar, we're used to the newest thing that everybody's excited about, and this year's been no different. I'd love your thoughts, Candace, about one of the following. It could be more than one of the following, but the bifacials are really interesting. People have been talking about them forever, but I feel like they really got some steam behind them this year. And floating arrays, really exciting to think about those. And I know you are thinking about that. And increasing module wattage, something that we kind of thought we'd maxed out years ago, is it just keeps getting higher and more powerful. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on one or more of those things, Candace.
Sure. I'll start with floating solar. It's a great opportunity. As you know, we own the largest floating array in California. We're definitely seeing an uptick in floating interest. We spent a lot of time on the safety procedures during the construction and for the operation of the system. And from a safety standpoint, it's a great application for MLPE. As you know, grounding is one of the biggest concerns when dealing with floating systems. And so even with minimal amounts of sun and high voltage, DC is present when using string and central inverters. So high voltage DC and water is really not a preferred combination, and MLPE takes most of that concern away, as high DC voltages are drastically
Great point. Super appreciate that. Rick, you could have picked floating too, but let's hear what you're thinking about.
Yeah, I'll comment on the bifacial modules as well as the higher wattage modules. They both lend themselves towards the same thing, which is the more watts you could pack in each module, or larger size module, the less modules you may need. And that's beneficial because the fewer modules you have, the less components, the less connections to racking, the less string wiring connectors you need. And fewer components means fewer points of failure, fewer points of risk for safety. So I'm a big fan of the push towards the higher wattage modules. Of course, nothing comes without a share of pros and cons. Larger modules could be heavier to carry out on a site. A little tougher to install, but that is outweighed, I think, by the benefits that the higher wattage modules give in reducing the number of components out on a site.
Then you were going to mention the bifacials.
Yeah, they're exciting when they're in the right application. And there's a lot of debate about what the boost you actually get is. It could be up to 20%, but in most instances, it's closer to 11% if you have the right reflective background or the modules raised up. So it is an exciting way to get extra wattage out of every module. And it just needs to be used in the right application. It's not universal. You just get bifacial modules and put them on a roof or a carport or ground mount, and you're just going to get the boost. You need to do some extra planning and really understand how much light is going to be coming up underneath so that you could properly model it in PV-Syst.
Great. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think it'll be interesting to see, people have talked to me about, large scale deployment of bifacials with and without optimization because of the increase in module mismatch. There's some really strong opinions on that. And I think we're going to see more and more data. So that'll be really interesting. Anybody can pipe in if they have some thoughts on the topic, but we can save that for last in case I don't want to miss any questions. We've got some good ones coming up. So Ben, I'll let you talk about production.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. And yeah, thanks for the insight, everyone, on some of those new technologies. As everyone said, I mean, bifacials we love bifacials because of Solaredge optimization. So it tends to be a great fit. And and also the increasing module wattage. I don't know what everybody else is saying, but we actually had a request for somebody who wanted to deploy a 575 watt module. I mean, who would have thought that in the industry just a few years ago? So it's crazy how that's continued to grow. So switching gears to production, this is also something that's near and dear to our hearts at Solaredge, because it fits so well with our value proposition. And being able to maximize energy harvest, which for asset owners means a lot more revenue. So I'll start with you, Edgar. Maybe you can describe how the value of energy production impacts your ROI, your return on investment, but also your go, no-go decisions for commercial projects as you deploy across the country in different markets where electricity rates may be lower or higher. So you got a lot of factors to think about when you're making decisions. So Edgar, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Ben. And I think it's pretty obvious that assuming CapEx and OpEx is a constant, the higher the energy production of the system, the better ROI it is for the client. However, in certain markets, just as you alluded to, like in New Jersey, as an example, where the TREC value is quite rich. The value of each kilowatt hour generated is higher, which places a premium, on designing a system which can yield the most specific production. I think at the end of the day, we're just trying to capitalize on the square footage of the roof that's available, and I think anything we can do to increase the kilowatt hours produced by that same square footage, it's something worth looking into.
Interesting insight. And certainly we'll see the flip side in some states where electricity rates are lower, and it's much harder to make projects pencil out. They may not have SRECs or TRECs or other vehicles, so it definitely makes it a challenge. So extra energy is something we always look for. So I'll switch it over to you, Candace. But before I ask you about the same question as I asked Edgar about production. We've seen C2 has just had meteoric rise over the last couple of years. And I'd really like to get your insight to, going back to the opening question, your insight to the commercial market and how that is rolling out and will roll out from your point of view, whether it's for C2 or just your industry observation.
Sure. I mean, as CJ mentioned and Rick, I'm really encouraged by what we're seeing in the marketplace today. We have our own in-house development and M&A activities, and both continue to thrive during this period. And I think when talking to customers, the interest and the appetite for renewables hasn't waned. And I think in the next few months, the C&I sector could really reach a point where it won't be able to physically keep up with the demand. We're seeing equipment currently that is typically available off the shelf that have 12 plus week lead times. And I think this demand coupled with COVID, manufacturing, logistic delays, unfortunately I don't see necessarily normalizing until well into 2021.
So thank you for that. Now switching back to the energy production or the production yield, how does that impact your projects, both ROI and how you decide whether you're going to go forward with them?
Sure. I mean, it starts, in the design process of really making sure that we are using, an accurate PV syst. And so if you talk to different IEs about one project, you might not necessarily get the same results. And so whether it's a different approach to losses, weather files, it's our responsibility to use as accurate assumptions as we can, and implementing the best technology to maximize production under the project parameters. And with Solaredge, for example, having the max power point tracking at the module level allows each module's output to be optimized, and that's easily could be a 2% gain in output by eliminating module mismatch. Also with projects that have shading concerns, reducing the module level, reducing it to a module level instead of a string level is critical as well. So.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, thanks for bringing up the extra energy production, the 2%. We actually see trends going as even without shading as high as 5% or 6% as the modules continue to age. Now, switching gears a little bit, we talked about the impact of production as you make your project decisions. But now you built the project, and we've all heard about production guarantees and how critical that is, especially when you have possibly demanding customers that want to see the numbers that they were promised. So CJ, from your point of view, what are the ramifications if you miss those production targets, and how do you mitigate that?
Well, as the long-term owner, operator of the systems that we develop and build, it directly lands on our shoulders. We are the sponsor equity of any project we're in. We own the projects and intend to own them for the full life of the PV systems. And any shortfall of production is a direct hit to our bottom line and Standard Solar's profitability and impact on what we estimated the project's returns to be versus what they are realized at. So we take a very serious look at our systems. We have our own O&M division in-house that operates under the name of Vigilant Energy Management. Very similar to what has been said previously is that we do have a feedback loop, just like Intersolar has, and many of these other firms, between our O&M division and our engineering, design, and construction divisions. We're focusing on robustness of our PV systems, reliability of the PV systems, and safety. We get direct information back about what's working, what's not working, what products we can rely on, which vendors provide the best service and the best responsiveness, and which systems are actually delivering on what we thought was the best assumptions for our production models up front. So we work very hard to react as quickly as possible when systems are not operating at peak performance. And we do pretty in-depth analysis and metric validation of system performance continuously. We have a whole team that's running our operations center and evaluating our entire portfolio on a daily basis.
That's wow. Sounds like it's could be a lot of work to manage that and still develop and build projects. But it sounds like you guys have that dialed in. Adam, from your point of view, how do you guys track production targets, and how do you de-risk that when things are not going as planned?
I'd echo what you've heard from CJ and Edgar, is that incorporating and growing your team internally so that you have that knowledge base for the design and engineering will help cut it off on the front end. Effective modeling to make sure that you're not overly aggressive or over aggressively modeling your system performance, and you're realistic, and that's backstopped with the knowledge you have from field production. Because everybody wants to, on the sales and development end, to get a system to pencil out and make sense for a financer. But when it comes to really owning and operating those systems, that creates the real world modeling information and real world predictability that helps you on the front end. And then on the back end, make sure that you are actively monitoring the systems and things that you own, you have a direct financial interest, and then extend that to other customers and other clients that you provide services to that may not have that. That's always been a barrier in the past, is some customers don't realize the impact of down production time, don't realize the value of owning and monitoring a system and paying someone for that service until they lose the production. And then they're in an angered situation of, wait, you said my system would produce this, but they didn't have the team and the expertise to do it. So now you're actually being able to leverage your internal systems to extend it out to other customers and help them deal with systems that should have been properly operated and maintained, should have been actively monitored. And now we have better monitoring systems and better technology to retrofit older systems and help them with lagging assets. You have stuff that's 5-10 years old that you're now starting to retrofit with newer technology, newer monitoring systems, and better performance to increase an asset that could have been failing, and so that you can get out of sometimes really uncomfortable financial situations from an asset owner, or even internally trying to help increase performance and output on a stranded asset that might be in that 8 to 10 year range, and you still need 10 years worth of good production, 15 years of good production out of it, and not end up in some situations where you're financially levered with a bank or another outside institution. That becomes a very difficult challenge, but you can leverage your internal resources and your internal assets to improve and increase something that could have been more of a liability and then can now become a good predicted asset for your company.
Okay, Adam, that's I love your comment on the retrofitting of older systems. I mean, there's so many gigawatts of projects out there that are, you know, approaching 10 years, and it'll be interesting to see how we all manage some of those older systems going forward. So thank you for that. So with that, I'll hand it back to Carolyn.
I wouldn't mind chiming back in, Ben. I think that one thing that's really important to mention is that there are no inverters on the market or a lot of other equipment that are infallible and operate perfectly all the time. And the true test of the right vendors to work with and the right products is when something goes wrong, how do they support you? How fast do they react? How responsive are they? What are they willing to do to help you get your system back up and running and operating at optimum performance? And, you know, we've worked with just about every major manufacturer of equipment, and the way that the manufacturers respond to issues for operations and maintenance and reactive maintenance really defines how we choose products moving forward. We want to choose good, high quality products. We want to choose, from an engineering perspective, products that are very compatible with the design and the constraints and goals of a project. But long-term operation reliability and support that we're getting from the vendors is a significant factor. And you can ask any vendor about it when you're selecting a vendor, but you don't really know until the rubber hits the road.
Carolyn?
Well, I'm grateful because that's an outstanding segue, CJ, to the next question we want to talk about. And it's really two-part. I mean, we put a slash in there, but bankability and partnership. I mean, you're really talking about a partnering situation, is my understanding of what you're saying. And so, you know, with that in mind, you know, Candace, you'll be the first one to answer this, is that, you know, as you're deploying these, you know, large scale portfolios of projects, and that you're a long-term asset owner, you know, how does bankability and partnering factor into your decision making? I mean, I love that you said that that's very important to you, CJ, but I'd love to think about, you know, hear about how you're thinking about it, Candace.
Sure. I mean, it's paramount for us as long-term owners and operators as well. We're in it, you know, for the 30 plus years, and looking for partners who are going to be there with us. We have a rigorous AVL process that has over 70 plus checkpoints, which takes into account not only the technical considerations, but we're also looking at the financial wherewithal of the company to make sure we're comfortable with the warranty backstops and obligations they're signing up to. And as CJ mentioned, you know, talking about that feedback loop of bankability, to us, that also includes how a vendor reacts when we experience issues. If your maintenance team can't get a question easily answered about how to troubleshoot an error code, or the equipment isn't quickly RMA'd, you know, that experience becomes critical to our future equipment selection process.
That's so helpful. I really appreciate it. Edgar, I'd love your thoughts on this same topic.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think after safety and reliability, bankability would be the next most important factor in selecting our major equipment providers. Both, I think, technical and financial bankability are reviewed by our team, and we have a checklist for that as well, as Carolyn Candace alluded to. But it's not a question of whether we'll need support, but I think it's a question of when we'll need support from our vendor partners to be, and we want them to be around when those situations arise. And I think ultimately we have a fiduciary duty to our clients, and bankability of the equipment providers is a key factor for that. I think going back to what CJ was mentioning about how a particular vendor responds in a situation where there might be a warranty claim or some sort of technical support. I think the word gets around pretty quickly within the industry, and I think that makes it that much more important, for the vendors, not Solaredge included, but other folks as well, to ensure that they're investing the right resources into their support department.
Right. No, thank you for that. It kind of just makes me think. I love both of your responses. Is that a process that you then review? Because with things changing so continuously in solar and people's fortunes changing overnight for some companies, is this a process that you review with a regular cadence?
Oh, absolutely. The ABL for us is a living, breathing document that we're constantly evaluating, and part of that evaluation is based off of the operation history of the systems and the performance. And so having that active dialogue with our asset management team to see what is, where the trouble points are, how they're being remedied, if they're being remedied quickly, and what is performing above expectations, that gets communicated to the design team to make future decisions.
Awesome. And I'm guessing yours is the same answer, that you're reviewing this regularly.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm guessing that's everybody's response. I just want to make sure. Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And with that, I know we're getting close to some final thoughts. But were there any questions asked, that you kind of thought, God, I wish I got to answer that question? Because I think now is a good moment. I think we're doing well on time.
I'd love to talk about bifacial modules and high efficiency modules.
Awesome. Tell us, CJ.
I agree with Rick. I would love to take credit for the higher efficiency modules, but we have nothing to do with that. We just buy them as we can. As modules improve in efficiency, the cost of the overall system goes down in general. Obviously, the module manufacturers have a specific throughput, and it's usually in units of modules, not in watts. So as they improve efficiency, they're able to be more competitive on a dollar per watt basis for sale of those modules. I think an important thing to pay attention to is that the module wattages are getting fantastically high. I've seen roadmaps showing 600 watt modules. But what's really important is pay attention that these aren't the same size and shape modules that we're used to. These aren't 992 millimeters by 1998 millimeter modules that we're used to. These are 2150 millimeters in length, and they're 1050 millimeters wide. They're getting bigger and bigger, and some of these 600 watt modules are even larger than that. The shingled cell technology is really interesting, but it needs a lot of technical diligence before adoption. And Standard Solar in general is very bullish on. I am very bullish on bifacial modules. Rick mentioned that it's important to understand the applications and use bifacial modules where appropriate. And Standard Solar has kind of taken the approach of, if it's not a flush mount rooftop application, like a standing seam metal roof or a corrugated metal roof, exposed fastener metal roof type application, we want to use bifacials. At the moment, for now, bifacials are exempt from the tariffs. And as long as they're exempt from tariffs, we're seeing a very small, if any, spread between bifacial and monofacial PV modules. So I'm observing the gain as almost free, because we're not paying much additional cost for those modules. So there's huge value for us. But I do agree that we have to understand the applications where the bifacial modules are being deployed. We need to understand the proper factors to use for production modeling and making sure that we're getting that right, whether it's albedo, ground clearance, rear side mismatch or shading, things like that. They do have a big impact, and they have changed the way we design systems. But what's really important is that we're maximizing energy density on projects. As Edgar mentioned, in New Jersey, energy density on rooftops is really important. So how many kilowatt hours per square foot can I generate in a year on those rooftops? We're seeing that the two things that constrain most of our designs are space constraint or AC capacity constraints, either by the policy in that state or local authority for net metering interconnection or other incentives, or the technical interconnection limit. So we're seeing systems that are typically AC limited, forcing us towards much higher DC to AC ratios, or they're space constrained. In space constrained applications, the higher the wattage module, the better off we are.
Awesome. If I could thank you, CJ. That's just great insight on the use of facials and size. I know, Edgar, you wanted to ask a question or bring up a comment, but if I could just come back just to the 2 points. I know that Rick wanted to talk a little bit more about safety. So maybe, Rick, if I could turn it back to you and get your thoughts on the safety aspect.
Sure. In my perspective, safety all begins with the design up front, design for both construction and operation. But something to keep in mind with the design is the codes, and understanding that the electrical and building codes are really just the legal minimum required for safety. That shouldn't be your goal, and the level of safety you want to achieve is just code compliance. That's the legal minimum. We really like to encourage, and most of our clients do, want to go above and beyond the code minimums. And a perfect example is, once again, the rapid shutdown rules. Some states are still on the NEC 2014 and haven't moved up to the National Electrical Code 2017 or 20 yet. So they don't have the requirement for the optimizers. They can still run the 600 or 1000 volt strings across a rooftop. And they're just not as safe as having an optimizer or MLPE. But there's still a lot of developers out there that aren't taking that step for safety and going with safer design, safer equipment until they really need to. A majority of our clients do that, but I just wanted to point out that we shouldn't be forced by code to step up our safety. Everyone always says safety is number one, but I just want to make sure everyone is actually putting their money where their mouth is. Maybe it's easy for me because it's not my money I'm spending to make systems more safe, but I really want to encourage everyone to just realize code is the minimum, and let's try to go above and beyond that.
Rick, thank you so much for that. I know that's music to Carolyn's ears and my ears when we hear that. So, big thumbs up on that comment. I do, the panelists are you want to come back on a couple of different topics. So sorry for going back a little bit, but I think there's some great insight that we want to hear. Adam, you wanted to talk a little bit about the market perspective and also energy value. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I was picking up on a comment that CJ made as well that impacts design and decision making of what is in a particular market for a commercial industrial customer driving the value of energy for them. And that perspective is shifting depending on the market you're in, as well as we start to run into things that aren't regulated or mandated incentive programs. In the Midwest here, we're running into really interesting opportunities with utilities taking ownership. And so then the value proposition for a commercial industrial customer can completely get flipped on its head, which then impacts your design, where you might be saying that energy value is very low, but the capacity value might be of interest to the commercial industrial customer. And so you're weighing multiple different value streams on any project, which is a really fun exercise for design and construction consideration. And as everybody knows, in solar, nothing stays the same. So it makes it very interesting to try to work in those markets and environments. And we start to actually have value streams that aren't just energy production. We have grid level support. We have smart inverter services that get incentivized, but now can be starting to be used in certain ISOs. We have utilities that can use values that maybe the C&I customer can't. So then you can use that to get a project across for both the utility and the C&I customer. And it opens that brave new world of really exciting opportunities that'll flip what we know of on its head over the next 5 to 10 years, and create great opportunities for both the customer and owners and operators in the system.
Thank you for that. Well, it looks like bifacials have brought up a lot of thoughts and questions and from everyone. I know, Edgar, you wanted to add to the bifacial conversation. Quite honestly, like 2 years ago, we hardly even heard about bifacials, and it came on the map. And CJ is probably because of what you said in terms of the tariffs, etc. But Edgar, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to add real quick, and yeah, I echo what Rick has said about the pros and cons and what CJ has mentioned with the energy production estimates. But for me, for us at EnerSolar, I think it is a no-brainer, especially for ground mount systems, regardless of region. We've seen it make sense in the dry deserts of the Southwest, to the seasonal Northeast, where the ground cover changes throughout the year for bifacials. But I think there's still a dearth of cost-efficient rooftop racking that is designed specifically for bifacials. And I think, as most people know, that the higher bifacial module is from the surface of where it's installed in, the better it is for production, along with spacing as well, from row to row. And I only know of one company in the market that has been at it for a few years now, making rooftop racking for bifacial modules specifically. But the cost of the racking itself and the mechanical attachments that's required, it has to be a fully attached system because ballasts seem to impede on some of the reflection off of the roof, and they're therefore recommending fully attached systems. And all in, the cost is almost double that of a conventional rooftop racking system. So I just want to make a call to the industry for to come up with more creative ways to fix this, to come up with a solution, and I see a great opportunity here. That's all I wanted. Yeah. Okay,
thanks, Edgar. Well, everybody has heard it here. Bifacials to all the racking suppliers that are out there listening. This is an opportunity for you. You're right here. You've got hundreds and hundreds of megawatts of developers and asset owners, so may want to take that input. So let's move to the last question that we have today. It's been a crazy year, right? This has been a year of COVID. We have an upcoming election, so everybody buckle up for that. We have the ITC ramp down. So the last question of the day, and we'll try to get through everybody on the panel to give a chance to give their input. So what is the biggest challenge that you will need to overcome in this current environment so that you could continue deploying and growing in the commercial space? So Adam, I'll start with you.
I think you said it well. The interesting part is that the solar world is used to uncertainty and changing and inconsistencies, and now the rest of the world is caught in that this year. So I think for a challenge is to be diverse in your markets. So as we see potential tax policy changes, federal policy changes, that you are able to adapt to any of that shifting. But for us internally, it's finding key staff to keep up with growth, because the market continues to grow exponentially. We've been growing at a 250% rate over the last 4 years, and it's being able to make sure you have key staff, good commitment from ownership and the ability to keep up with the pace of this industry so that you can maintain good quality of service to your customers and owner and operators. And that's all built on the backs of really smart and really dedicated individuals, and finding those to keep up with the pace is going to be our biggest challenge in the next 3 years.
Candace, your thoughts? I'm sorry, you may be muted.
Yep. Sorry, I was just saying, to build off of what Adam was saying, it's really to keep up with the demand, which is a good challenge to have, but nonetheless requires a number of stars to align, from labor capacity to equipment availability, normal interconnection review periods, timely town meetings. For most of us, we know the projects we're working on have strong foundations. It's not a question of if they'll move forward. It's just how we can best navigate them through this current environment.
Okay. Thank you, Candace. Rick, your thoughts?
Sure. So the solar industry is growing not just because it's green, but because it makes financial sense. These solar projects are a home run for an opportunity to make and save money for these building owners. So we just need to make sure that these systems stay reliable and keep achieving the performance that they're expecting. And that comes in a few forms, making sure, like Candace said, you don't get overly aggressive on your PV systems and have it unreliable there. But also from the quality standpoint, making sure that the systems perform and are reliable so that they can achieve those PV syst estimated amounts. And as long as we do that, solar is going to keep growing. We just have to be careful of getting greedy. There will be challenges next year, also, like Candace said, about the demand outpacing our ability to scale up to it. We got to keep an eye on quality. Don't think of engineering, installation contractors, and O&M as commodities that just need to be done at the lowest price. We need to take care of quality and safety and make sure that these systems continue to be reliable and achieve their expected financial results, and will continue to take off.
Okay. Rick, thank you for that. Thanks for covering all aspects of it, not just the design side, but all the way up to maintaining these over the long term, because it's often not something that we'll see from many companies, and pretty much all of you guys are very, very focused on that. So that's awesome. CJ, your thoughts, your biggest challenge that you see coming up?
Permitting and interconnection. That's simple. The time and cost associated with getting through both is astronomical in many cases where it should be simple. We work with hundreds of authorities having jurisdiction throughout the country, and they are widely inconsistent on the requirements for permitting. And that's a real challenge. We have simple distributed generation projects, sub 2 megawatt capacities that take 18 to 24 months to get a permit. That's absurd. We've got to figure out how to do better. Unfortunately, we're working with hundreds of completely independent authorities having jurisdiction that do things their own way. Interconnection is a real challenge. We are also hiring, and it is a challenge to keep people going and keep our staff up with the right skill set, but not as big as permitting and interconnection. And in our interview processes, we've actually talked to several engineers that are distribution interconnection engineers for utility companies. And they do intentionally slow down your projects and create additional over-conservative requirements, which drive up cost. This is a real issue. I don't have the answers, but is by far the biggest challenges are permitting and interconnection for us. If we could get those out of the way, we'd triple our productivity on systems we get in service.
Okay, well, CJ, that's so we heard it here, right? Bifacials, how critical those are, and permitting and interconnection. I think that's been an industry struggle since the beginning, and even more so under COVID conditions. So thank you for that insight, CJ. Last but certainly not least, Edgar, the challenges that you see in the coming year.
Yeah, sure thing. And I really agree with what everyone has said so far. But just a quick comment on what Rick was mentioning about making sure that people are designing safe, reliable systems. I think it comes down to making investments, proper investments in the right places. I have a saying that you can either pay now or pay later. And if you pay later, you're probably gonna have to pay more. And I think, having a well-designed engineered systems, a well-engineered design system, it's like having a good insurance policy, right, for your clients, so to speak. So, but back to the closing question, I think I'd like to comment a little on the impacts of COVID, right, within the industry this year. And I think the Commerce Department reported that our GDP, which is a broadcast of the broadest measure of economic activity, shrank at an annual rate of about 32.9% in the second quarter of this year. And I think the potential surge in COVID-19 cases over the winter might further exacerbate the GDP contraction in the coming quarters. And that said, I agree with what Wood Mackenzie mentioned, their recent commercial landscape report early this year, that there will be less appetite for commercial businesses to procure solar, either through long-term commitments like PPAs and leases, or large outlays of capital through direct ownership, as the projected economic conditions take hold. Additionally, I think commercial energy demand has decreased and is expected to remain low throughout the downturn, reducing demand for commercial solar. But that said, I believe Enersolar has dug our well before the thirst, so to speak, by having forged long-term solid partnerships with both sides, key corporate accounts, our clients, and these are folks the likes of Target, Medline, Prologis, which still have plenty of opportunities within their portfolio for us to look at and develop together, but also on the vendors side of things. I think we need to, we have worked well and will continue working very well with our key vendor partners. And no doubt that these partnerships, will carry us through the current environment. And I'm excited for the rest of the year. In 2021, we are as busy as ever. All 6 pistons are running, or if in the case of EV, both your motors in the front and the back are churning at full speed. Everyone is busy. Everyone's fully utilized. And we're very excited. We think 2021 has a lot to offer.
Great. Well, thank you, Edgar. Well, I think we've heard some, great insights on safety, technology, production, bankability. So, thanks everyone for that, the input that you've given. I do want to switch gears real quickly, give a little shameless plug here. Just wanted to talk a little bit about Solaredge for those of you that may not be very familiar with what we do. So the first thing is, this is Solaredge. So we are the #1 inverter company in the world by revenue. That's a metric that we think is very, very key. And I'll point out 3 things from this slide. The first is we have over 1.6 million systems monitored around the world on our monitoring platform. We also have over 20 gigawatts of systems deployed around the world. And lastly, we have about 650 patents. Technology is what we're all about. We have 650 patents that have either been awarded or in process. So this is the Solaredge commercial solution in one slide. So we do optimization, we have inversion, and we have a suite of accessories that give us a full turnkey package for any of your commercial solutions. Now, when we talk about Solaredge and the benefits that we bring, or the value proposition that we bring to all of our customers, there's really 4 things that I want to highlight. The first is maximizing energy yield. So because of optimization, we're able to provide the highest amount of solar production or energy yield or harvest on any of your solar systems. The second thing is reducing balance of system costs. So because of optimization, as I mentioned before, we're able to get these really, really long strings, and really long strings means fewer strings. Fewer strings mean less wiring. So we're saving a lot of wire, a lot of cable on your projects. Safety, well, safety is the DNA of Solaredge. That's how the company got started. When we look at safety, we're looking at it from an installation point of view, so for our installers, from a maintenance point of view, for firefighters, as well as for the long-term operation of the system. And the last key benefit that I want to highlight is lower O&M costs. So because of our monitoring portal, you're able to see right down to the module level. And that gives our O&M partners the ability to make really, really intelligent decisions before rolling trucks. So over the long term, you will save O&M costs. So lastly, just a quick summary or a quick slide showing some pictures of many installations and applications that we see across the country, really around the world. And this includes ground mount, rooftop, carport applications, everything from Fortune 500 to floating arrays and all the industries that you see here.
Thanks, Ben. I just want to thank everyone again. It's been such a pleasure. You're collectively a powerhouse of information and insight, and I can't thank you enough. And I want to thank all of the participants for Solar Power International Virtual First. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of today and the rest of the show.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks again.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.